And it's something that rarely gets covered, and it's unpleasant. But we've never shied away from stories, this group, that many others do. And it's about ritual abuse. And it will get covered in more detail in a coming up soon show. But ritual abuse exists all over the world. And there have been reports, journal articles, web pages, and criminal convictions of crimes against children and adults. And it has obvious associations with mind control programs such as MKUltra and its derivatives, which is the Milgram experiment, together with the whole gamut of associations summarized by the terms pedophocracy and VI pedophile, VIP. Now, the origins of those terms, Larry Pazder introduced the term ritualized abuse in 1980, describing the experiences of an adult survivor that was disclosing satanic abuse memories. And he defined the phenomenon as repeated physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual assaults combined with a systematic use of symbols, ceremonies, and machinations designed and orchestrated to attain malevolent effects. Now, later definitions came mostly from professionals addressing ritual abuse in child care settings. Finkelhor, Williams, Burns, and Kalinowski elaborated on Pazder's definition, defining ritual abuse as abuse that occurs in a context linked to some symbols or group activity that have a religious, magical, or supernatural connotation, and where the invocation of these symbols or activities are repeated over time and used to frighten and intimidate the children. Of course, we covered this in From Russia with Love 8A or 8C about the mandalas, because they are used in these events. Now, Kelly referred to ritual abuse as the repetitive and systematic sexual, physical, and psychological abuse of children by adults as part of a cult or satanic worship. Now, there is a great deal of evidence supporting the existence of ritual abuse crimes as a worldwide phenomenon, and Bottoms, Shaver, and Goodman found in their 1993 study evaluating ritual abuse claims that in 2,292 alleged ritual abuse cases, 15% of the perpetrators in adult cases and 30% of the perpetrators in child cases confessed to the abuse. Now, in a survey of 2,709 members of the American Psychological Association, it found that 30% of these professionals had seen cases of ritual or religion-related abuse. And that was done in 1991. And of those psychologists who have seen cases of ritual abuse, 93% of them believed that the reported harm took place, and 93% believe that the alleged ritualism actually occurred. Now, a similar research of Nancy Perry, 1992, which further supports the previous findings, Perry also conducted a national survey of therapists, or the rapists, who work with clients with dissociative disorders, and she found that 88% of the 1,185 respondents indicated belief in ritual abuse involving mind control and programming. Now, recently, an online survey of over 1,000 people answered questions about ritual abuse and extreme abuse crimes. And in the summary of the survey, it was found that ritual abuse, mind control, is a global phenomenon, and 55% stated they were abused in a satanic cult. 77% of the adult survivors that responded had been threatened with death if they ever talked about the abuse. Also, 257 respondents reported that secret mind control experiments were used on them as children. 82% reported being sexually abused by multiple perpetrators. That's the Monarch program. Now, Ann Johnson Davis, in her book Hell -1, reported that her parents confessed to her abuse in writing and verbally to the clergyman and to the detectives from the Utah Attorney General's office. No surprise, it was Utah. You have no idea how prevalent that is in that state. And her suppressed memories started when she was in her mid-30s, which were fully substantiated by her mother and stepfather. And many scientific journals or articles have discussed the reality of ritual abuse and its effect on its victims. Now, some of the articles have discussed the extreme nature of these crimes, the proof of the reality of the ritual abuse phenomenon, and victims' symptoms, and the connection between ritual abuse, multiple personality disorder, and mind control, and also the connections between ritual abuse reports and the higher levels of symptoms of childhood sexual and physical abuse. Several additional studies and organizations have compiled research on the reality of ritual abuse crimes, and ritual abuse and mind control crimes have also been confirmed in other books. Now, a study which identified 270 cases of sexual abuse in a daycare setting found that allegations of ritual abuse occurred in 13% of the cases, which means the rest of it was covered up. Additional evidence of ritual abuse in daycare and child abuse cases have been found in news reports, journal articles, and also legal transcripts. Now, the ritual abuse occurrences have also been heavily found not only in America, but in Holland and England. And reports of ritual abuse have also been found in multiple personality disorder sufferers. That's the mind control. It splits the mind into 7 to 12 parts. I know, I lived in one for the best part of 6 years. The alters. And this type of skullduggery is the hidden cancer on this planet in many ways. Children born in military families are particularly prone to this, which is what happened to Chloe. But there's a number of others that are in the alt media, a high proportion of lead speakers who have all been in the programs. And again, like I said, we'll cover that more in another show. But Kemp believes that the intergenerational satanic accounts are possible and that rituals related to them may come from a deviant interpretation of, quote, religious texts, unquote. And yes, a lot of this is connected to religiosity. In fact, some would argue it all does. And others have stated that the theories and research around recovered memory strongly confirms the reality of cult abuse of SRA survivors. And then we have the muddying of the waters of how people try to cover it up. The abuse of children, whatever the apparent motives of the abusers, involves such a gross betrayal of trust and is so abhorrent to the mass of any population that it can be very difficult to approach the subject in a completely detached and rational manner. And that's how they get away with it, you see. That's why I've chosen to put this in, because others won't. Oh, I don't want to hear about that. It's the same as the pedophilia when it first started. I was telling people about royals in the churches back in the late 1980s and 90s. I don't want to hear about that. Well, you're going to, because that's the way to stop it. It has to come out of the dark and into the light. And it's said of all human vices and perversions, pedophilia is seen as probably the most shameful and outrageous in the public mind, and the transition to branding it as sort of occult evil is therefore more or less inevitable when religious overtones are added. And this is the problem again with the religious. They'll overlook it because that's not possible, you see. It's we're godly and we're this and we're that. Wrong. It's where it came from. The church. And people can rail at me all they like, but those are the facts. This is why I did what I did with From Russia with Love, exposing the church on all levels and the damage it has done to we the people. It thus has vast potential as a source of Machiavellian manipulation and control on the one hand, and witch hunts by overzealous but ostensibly well-meaning authorities on the other. This is where they muddy the waters, as the report says. Anything to shut it down. Now, this was a brief discussion of the latter as applied to the UK, as follows. Overtly religious forms of ritual abuse seem to have been first recognised as a serious issue in the US back in 1972 with the publication of From Witchcraft to Christ. Oh my, what a title that is. And it's correct in many ways. Again, people are not going to like me saying that, but go and research yourself with an open mind. And that book was written by Doreen Irvine, and the autobiography of a former high priestess of Satan, describing events alleged to have happened in England. This is why the judges all wear the black robes. They are high priests and high priestesses, and they're involved in it as well. And it stated many Satanists would be present, about 800 or more. All meetings included awful scenes of perverted sexual acts, and my ability to levitate 4 to 5 feet was real, she said. It was not a hoax. The demons aided me to do that. And like I've stated previously, all magic is done by the dark. And it only gives the illusion that you performed it. You have to dance with the dark for it to take place. Now, after the book's publication, US police investigated and dismissed more than 10,000 complaints. Though let's not forget they have a predisposition to dismiss where powerful interests are involved. But also they're connected to the Freemasons or the Fraternity Brotherhood, who are also involved in this, because it goes back to Egypt again. And the modern day Israel. And the scare was then brought to England by Doreen Irvine in April and September 1988. MP Geoffrey Dickens warned of the prevalence of satanic child abuse, claiming up to 50 young children a year were being murdered, and the rest. And his evidence included the increasing demand for occult books in libraries, the popularity of black magic videos, and the spread of New Age shops. Oh dear. Now, the well-known BBC TV Cook Report had an episode on Devil's Work on the 17th of July 1989, and social work conferences were held, particularly one at Reading University in September of 89 on the theme of Not One More Child. Now, belief in the danger of satanic rituals quickly became very widespread amongst social workers. More than 50 children in England and Scotland were removed from their homes on the grounds that their parents were practicing Satanists. And after investigations lasting up to 4 years, all charges were dropped and all the children supposedly abused by Satanists were allowed back home. This is where they do the cover-up. And one of the cases that seems to have triggered the scare was a case in Nottingham, where sex parties involving children under the age of 7. 27 young children were put into care, and in February 1989, 8 male members of the family and a family friend were imprisoned. Now, a social worker arranged for the new foster mothers of these children to be briefed by the Americans Jerry Simondal and Pamela Klein, and the children began to recall satanic rituals. In Trafford, Manchester, 2 sisters who had been abused were taken into care in October of 89 and were, according to the report, coaxed by experts. No, they weren't coaxed at all. And after 3 months, they started telling stories of witch parties which they had attended, with babies and animals killed and blood being drank. 11 more children were taken into care, and it said an innocent man was arrested in January of 1990. The children were then held for a further 10 months until a High Court judge ordered their release, and the Social Services Department accepted criticism of their methods. So what this is saying is the social workers were being briefed on this satanic abuse, reporting on it, and then because it came out too much, the authorities slapped it down and then criticised social services on their methods and misstated that they were coaxing the children to come up with fake stories. What bollocks that is. And a case in Rochdale in November 1989 did not involve any real abuse, but after months of interviews, a frightened boy and his dreaming sister were persuaded, it said, to implicate still more families. Also rubbish. Now, 10 children remained in custody until a 47-day High Court hearing exposed the evidence as ridiculous in March 1991. And there involves the Justice Department, who are involved in the same thing. Judges are high priests. Now, the following day, after that, the Director of Social Services for Rochdale resigned. And 2 social workers who had done some of their own research on satanic abuse were transferred. This is what they do. Now, eventually, Professor Jean Lafontaine of LSE was commissioned to study the affair in England and Wales, and some of the Scottish cases were said to be even more alarming. However, there is only a judicial report on the case in Orkney, and in 1998 LaFontaine blamed the spread of satanic abuse stories on the evangelical Christian movement and on professional specialists, American and British, purveying unreliable information. So in comes the authority over the authority to try and squash it all out. It's protecting the higher people. They'll throw people under the bus, but they'll always protect the higher people. Well, with the likes of this, we're exposing them. Well, this is all part of the great cover-up practice, and discrediting the children and the staff is a common practice. They won't touch anything that's not classed as normal. And the first thing is to declare the children with a mental disorder. No, they have an abuse issue. And this is far more common than people would like to believe happens, and yet again involves the groups designated to look after the people. Churches, hospitals, police, judges, etc., etc., as the vehicles with which to damage us. You cannot forgive if you don't forgive yourself. You cannot trust if you don't trust yourself. You cannot fully care for others if you don't care for yourself. You cannot think for others if you don't think for yourself. You cannot soothe anger if you don't restrain your own. You cannot heal your inner if you continue to project outer. You cannot request change if you don't change yourself. Ascension is an inner process, not an external. You cannot hope to achieve high consciousness with lower vibrational actions and thinking. You cannot heal the planet if you haven't healed yourself. You cannot love if you don't love yourself. Not loving yourself leads to a heart of stone, and the Excalibur air sword we all have the potential of holding only becomes a self-cutting tool. What has taken place this year is a clear, defined split of the people. Within the masses, there is the thinkers and non-thinkers, the non-mask wearers and the non-thinking mask wearers. In the US, the division is multifolded, divided by Republican or Democrat, white or black, left or right, grey or straight, Christian or none, and the list goes on. In the world of finance, the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. In the world of mainstream media, the gap between fact and fiction got wider. In the alt media also. But the alt media also added another division between those who chase the money and the subsequent saviour programs and those who work on themselves and save each other. It's a daily practice now of clowns and their agents to try and throw me off track and change the focus. People trying to bait me, undercover agents using lies and distortions trying to goad me, Well, you know what? It failed. And the question to the people who do this is, why are you failing yourself? If we are not over the target or on the correct path, why is so many copying our methods and ideas? THI is now isolated like the clowns and their paid agents wanted. We are an island in a cesspool of bullshittery. Wear it proud. Continue to work on the self and help others. Unity, solidarity and loyalty to each other wins.